Let me out of the car. On a dark, cold night in the late 70s, my dad's truck broke down about an hour from his home. He started walking and put his thumb out hitching for a ride, and was soon picked up by a middle-aged man in a brown sedan. My dad gets in the car. "Thanks, man, I appreciate the lift." The driver doesn't respond. "I'm trying to get further north. Where are you headed?" Driver, again, doesn't respond, and begins to drive. Without even a look, the driver locks the doors and puts his hand on my dad's upper thigh and squeezes. My dad was 24 to 25 years old. He worked in construction, specifically drywall. He wasn't a tall man, but he was barrel-chested and stocky. My dad turns to face him. "I'm not into that, I just need a ride." Driver doesn't move his hand. After 10 seconds of silence, "Let me out the car!" Driver doesn't respond, doesn't even look at him. My dad grabs the hand and peels it off his thigh. "Let me out the car, motherfucker! I will kick your fucking ass! Let me out now!" My dad was ready to strike. Without a word, again, without even looking at him, the driver pulls over, unlocks the door, and my dad jumps out. Driver peels off. My dad eventually arrives home and tells everyone what happened. Family doesn't believe him. A few years later, he's dating my mum. They're watching the news, which is covering the arrest of serial killer John Wayne Gacy. My mum said my dad went pale. My dad jumps out of his chair, shaking violently, started screaming and pointing at the TV. "That's him! That's the guy who picked me up!" My mum said she believed him immediately. My dad wasn't much of a liar or a prankster. He was blunt. He was rather quiet and didn't particularly crave attention. I was so intrigued by this incident that in the late 90s I read a few books on Gacy, including the one written based on his interviews. Gacy picked up countless hitchhikers over a multi-year period in the 70s. Sometimes he would pick up hitchhikers and take them wherever they wanted to go, without incident. The timeline, details, geography, MO are all consistent. My theory is that Gacy picked up my dad thinking he was younger than he was, and he then tested out my dad's reaction. My dad was a bit older than Gacy's target age of 18 to 20. When my dad fought back aggressively and immediately, Gacy figured he wasn't worth the trouble, and possibly also realised that my dad was not as young as he looked. A few years ago, my husband and I were at an event, and we started chit-chatting with a couple seated at our table. For some unremembered reason, I told this story. The female half of the couple turned white and stared at me, mouth agape. She said that her uncle has an almost identical Gacy encounter. I'm just so sad for those who are unable to escape. Bruja. I'm second-generation American. Both sets of grandparents moved from Mexico when they were young adults. My younger sister and I had a fairly typical upbringing. La chancla, chinga tu madre, sewing supplies in the cookie box, and of course, folklore, to scare us disobedient children into behaving. La Lorna scared me most of all. A weeping woman who wandered around late at night searching for her children. Random children who were out too late and found by her were promptly drowned. My little sister, on the other hand, was certain that the boogeyman lived in our basement, and she refused to go down there. We were all scared of Abuela. Nothing scared the neighbourhood kids more than the woman who lived on the corner. Already somewhat of a shabby neighbourhood, her house was covered in overgrown weeds and had peeling newspaper covering up her windows. Us kids said she was a bruja, a witch. A popular pastime was to choose one kid to suck up enough courage, have them run up to her door, bang on it while screaming, "Bruja!" and then run away. She would run outside, her grey and black hair flying, and scream curses at us. After a while, the Bruja game ended, because she started scaring us more badly than we could scare her. She took to roaming the streets, screaming obscenities, death threats, and various nonsense about demons. Whatever game was being played in the street was promptly abandoned when she came around. The adults told us to stay away. They were certain she was off medication or something. Police were called, and promptly told us we couldn't do anything unless she actually became violent. One night, I woke up in the bed I shared with my sister because I had to pee. It was an unusually warm summer night, and my nightgown was sticking to my legs. So, before going to the bathroom, I foolishly opened the door in our room that led out to our patio. I was planning to stand there for a few minutes. I don't know. I listened to the leaves blowing. Whatever thoughts an 8-year-old girl has. Rustling in the bushes made my body turn cold, and my first thought was that Lorna had finally found me, and this was my punishment for not cleaning up dinner like I had been asked to. Nope, it was the Bruja, with a strange-looking lump covered by a towel under her belt. Out she came from the bushes, and in 1, 2, 3 steps she was over to me, grabbing my wrist and pulling. She started talking, and I, shocked into compliance, let her pull me along. She was muttering under her breath. I remember feeling a warm trickle down my leg as my bladder let go. It wasn't until we were about 10 feet to the backyard gate that I realised my exact situation, and I started screaming. And when I did, she let go of my wrist and ran. Simple as that. The investigation that inevitably followed turned up one thing: the towel under her belt. It contained a fillet knife. She was taken away, and we never saw her again. Early morning terror. New Year's Eve went out without a hitch, and I'd say it was a great success at work. I work as a bartender at a popular bar, club and restaurant, and knew I'd make money. Despite wishing I was with my friends, as a poor college student, this cash would definitely help me out. There is a shortcut that I usually take when I get out of work late. It takes you through the back of the strip where my bar is, and leads you to the townhouse complex where my roommates and I live. They were outside the city, partying. As I was walking back, I saw 2 men sitting on the curb smoking. There were a few other restaurants located in the vicinity of my bar, so I figured they were closing up there and taking a little break. I didn't make eye contact and walked along, but paid close attention to them. And then I heard, "Hey baby, I'd love to have a piece of that ass." Turning around, I saw that both guys had gotten up and were a short distance behind me, walking towards my direction. They were laughing and making lewd comments to me. "Come on babe, we'll take care of you tonight. It's not safe for a pretty little thing like you to be walking around this late. Do you need a ride? Oh, we'll give you a ride, alright." I was absolutely terrified and knew I had to get away. The entrance to my complex was coming up, but I was afraid that they would follow me to my house. Now, as soon as you enter the complex, the dumpsters are to your left. You essentially open the door and discard your trash in the bin. Knowing this, I came up with a plan. Though I picked up the pace, I could hear their footsteps grow closer. They were still a distance behind me, but were laughing and talking about how the night is young. It was then I decided that I have one chance to get away. I took off in a run, darted left in my complex, opened the door to the dumpsters and threw myself in, grabbing the door and slowly closing it so it did not make any noise. I was surrounded by empty cartons of milk and sat in complete filth. There are little holes and spaces through the dumpster in which you can see the outside. I found this out the hard way, obviously, and saw the men running past me while cursing and hollering. "Coming out, bitch! We won't hurt ya!" One of the guys turned around to face the dumpster, reached into his jacket and pulled out a knife. "Forget it, man. We'll pick up another bitch. She could be anywhere." You cannot possibly fathom the relief I felt when I saw them turn around and leave the complex. I sure as hell did not get out though, fearing that they were waiting right past the entrance. I pulled out my cell phone and called the police right then and there, telling the dispatcher that I'm hiding in the dumpster. They pulled in 5 minutes later, though those 5 minutes felt like an eternity. They said I did the right thing by staying inside until they showed up. I gave them a description and prayed that these two are caught as soon as physically possible. I enrolled in an MMA class and will arm myself any time I go out.